Hello and welcome to Eurorack Roundup for the month of November 2016. I'm Donald Crunk. We're going to take a look at every module released during the month of November. By my count, there's 32 modules that were released this month, and we're going to take a look at all of them. So I've listened to many of your suggestions. There were excellent suggestions about how to, trim some of the fat on the show, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to attempt to shorten it down. I appreciate those of you that listened to the entire thing the last time. I know many of you did, and I appreciate that. So, without any further ado, I'm going to dive right in, and we're going to take a look at the first module. It's the 902 VCA from Aion Modular. Aion Modular. 902 VCA is a Eurorack clone of the Moog Modular of 902. It's a voltage-controlled amplifier with balanced, directly coupled inputs and outputs. Let's take a look at the faceplate. It's really mind-bending when you look at this thing because at first glance, that's a Moog module. No problem. But the scale of everything is off. The knob is enormous compared to the size of everything else. So let's take a close look at it. The module itself is fairly simple, but you see you can have three control inputs at the bottom for the VCA. They're summed, two signal inputs, one in, one out, and a fixed control voltage that will just reference to the control inputs and open the VCA essentially, as well as a switch to switch between linear and exponential mode. So this is presumably a copy of the Moog 902 VCA, which is excellent. Moog has decided to go a different way with their Eurorack offerings. Aion kind of picked up the slack there, but yeah, look at the knob. They're using the knob from the Moog Modular. As near as I can tell, the same size knob, maybe a clone of it, a modern reproduction. It looks just like it. But look how big it is compared to the rest of the module. It messes with your head. And also look at this little silver bit here. This makes it seem like, it has the classic sort of C-frame construction of the old Moog modular, where there's a big giant metal piece that extends into the case and holds the circuit board physically, as well as the wiring harnesses. And that was standard. Those bent metal edges are still used in the 5U world today for a similar purpose. In this case, they're just, I think painted on the side, really, which is fine. It adds to the image. It looks just like a Moog module shrunk down, scaled down. This module is $202 US and 6 HP. We're going to skip the power ratings now for the sake of time. But I'll mention them if they're weird or anything like that. Next up is the 911EG envelope generator from Aion Modular. It's a Eurorack clone of the classic Moog Modular 911. The 911 ADSR generates the control voltage contours required for producing envelopes. Attack time, T1. So see, it's labeled differently here. This is, the control panel is a clone of the 911. Attack time T1, decay time T2, and release time T3 are all independently variable over a 2 millisecond to 10 second range. So that's quite wide, actually, making the module suitable for very fast percussive sounds or long and evolving sounds. So here you can see the seconds marked out on the control panel with T1 attack, T2 decay, and T3 release is followed up by your normal sustain control. So the sustain control is on the bottom instead of where the release control here would be. As well, you have a manual push button to fire the envelope, an LED to tell you when the envelope is firing, an input and an output. So very simple module, again with basically a direct clone of the Moog module. $202, 6 HP, the 911EG. Next up we have the 923 noise filters from Aion Modular. The 923 noise filters module provides a white noise and a pink noise source along with a manual low pass and 6 dB high pass filter. The two manual sweep filters are single pole circuits with a frequency cutoff slope of 6 dB per octave and a frequency range of 10 Hz to 10 kilohertz. The top module is going to be your low pass circuit. The middle one is the high pass. Manual filters. Why would I want a manual filter? Why wouldn't I want it under voltage control? I think there are use cases for manual filters, though. Sometimes you don't necessarily need to put the filter under voltage control. What if you just want to remove part of the frequency range just because you don't want it there? Maybe there's a weird squeak you don't want. So 2 different types of noise, 2 different filters. So $213, again, 6 HP for the 923 noise and filters by Aion Modular. Next, we have the Blind Monk Modular Programa synchronizable modulation generator. The Programa is a highly controllable 8-bit modulation source / envelope generator that can generate complex yet synchronized control voltages. Inputs trigger the rise and fall of the voltages, holding the voltage at its current position, reset it back to 0, and change the rise and fall speed. So it's an envelope generator that basically can absorb lots of triggers, gates, and CVs if you have those floating around extra in your system, and spit out more interesting results based on those inputs. So let's take a look at the panel here. So you have an up and a down input. So my understanding is that if you apply a gate or anything above 2.5 volts to this input, you'll get essentially the reverse of a decay generator, so an attack generator. Just a slope up, and applying a trigger to the down, you'll just get a slope down here out of this output. So it's essentially a decay and an attack generator that are separated. You're also offered a pause, which would presumably something higher than 2.5 will pause that function wherever it's at. A clock input, a reset input for the function, so it'll take it back down to 0. A speed input, so for the overall speed of the function, I believe, and an output. I don't know of another module that does exactly what this does. I like the front panel as well. This is a very bold and striking 4 black lines descending down from on high and slashing over like the bottom of the state of Nevada or something, It's very nice. White knobs, very nice panel. The Programa from Blind Monk Modular. I just want to point out briefly that there's 29 milliamps drawn on the 5-volt rail, so this does require the 5-volt, $169, 8 HP Programa from Blind Monk Modular. Next, we're going to look at the ADM21 Aeverb Mark II from Audio Damage. Aeverb Mark II has 2 algorithms selected by the algo switch. The first is an extended version of the original algorithm with a much longer decay time and heavier diffusion for a major improvement in both the sound and the capabilities, presumably over the Mark I module. The second algorithm removes the diffusers, changes the internal EQ and feedback routing somewhat, and shortens the delay times for a room simulation that is perfect for percussion sounds. So, another audio damage reverb module. We've seen the Mark I version of this already, and if you've heard it in person, it's a fairly dark reverb, I'd say, but it's a nice sounding reverb. If you're into the Autechre reverb sound, you're gonna love this module for sure. It's a dense reverb, I would say. The Mark II looks like it adds stereo, which I think is really nice. I like a stereo reverb, who doesn't? And notably, every parameter here is under voltage control. He also has sort of those contextual markings, which I really like under or for the knob control here. So, for instance, for the high pass filter, 50 hertz to 7 kilohertz, there is marked right on the front panel, as well as the input range that the CV inputs accept. So plus minus 5 volts are accepted into this hole. It tells you right there. Now, it's in very small print, but hey, that's not something that you're going to have to reference nonstop. It's nice that it's there, even if it is in small print. That's the ADM21 Aeverb Mark II. It's $289, 6 HP. It's a stereo reverb and 6 HP. What do you want? There's not a lot of them in Eurorack right now, and this one sounds really good. Next up, we have the first of a line of modules from GMSN! Exclamation point. It's the power module that's meant to power the rest of the modules that we'll take a look at here in a second. It's the Pure Power module. The Pure Power module is a very powerful Eurorack power supply. It supplies plus minus 12 volts and 5 volts at 1.7 amps and also has a host of protection features. Essentially, it's an 8 HP, or a 4 HP module with a ribbon cable connected to it that's going to power your other modules. But I just want to take a look briefly here. Plus minus 12 volts and 5 volts at 1.7 amps. Now, if you're new to Eurorack, you take a look at that and say, oh, okay, I've got 1.7 amps. Yeah, that's awesome. And you do. You do have a combined total of 1.7 amps. But let's take a look at the bottom here at the exact module specifications listed, and you'll see that you actually have 834 milliamps on the plus 12 and 5 volt combined. So the 5 volt, if you have anything that needs 5 volt power, it's going to pull what it needs from the 12 volt line, and you'll lose power directly from that, as well as 834 milliamps on the negative 12 volt line. So keep that in mind when you're taking a look at this module. You see 1.7 amps up there in the headlines. This is just, it's important to always read the specification of a module thoroughly, especially a power module. Very important because you're powering your entire system off of this, right? Next up is the Pure Quantiser from GMSN. It takes an analog CV and converts it to musical scales with LED buttons. And so you can see it's the keyboard style of Quantiser, which there's 3 now that I know of. Oh, maybe 4 now that are dedicated quantizers. Otherwise in Eurorack, such as the U scale from IntelliGel, the new Tip Top, as well as the pin rod, I believe, is the other module. It's a DIY module. This is the Pure Quantiser. It's got a CV input, a trigger light, presumably, a trigger output, and a CV output. And this says glide underneath this knob. You can't read that very well. You have a full scale of latching buttons that light up. And this can inform the quantizer as to what notes you want in the scale. So your CV goes in and comes out as a nice scale that you can then feed to your oscillators. This one is interesting because it does omit a trigger input, which means that any CV you feed it is going to have that little blurb at the beginning of the note, where it's tracking this incoming CV and looking at which note essentially to place that incoming CV. It takes a little while to do that, and without a trigger input, you'll sometimes get a little bit of a slew that you may not want. It depends on the quantizer and the design, of course. I haven't heard this one, so I can't comment, but without a trigger input, oftentimes I've experienced that on other quantizers. Now, this one does offer you a glide control, which is unusual for a quantizer module, but it is an easy way to get portamento, I guess. So this is the Pure Quantizer from GMSN, $155, 8 HP. Next up, we have the Pure Noise from GMSN with 4 different types of noise in a 4 HP module. White noise, which is white noise. Blue noise, it's a high-pitched noise and is good for synthesizing hi-hats. Pink noise has the same amount of energy in every octave. Brown noise is a low-frequency Brownian motion. When paired with a sample and whole module, this can give a good random walk baseline. So this is a CV output, essentially. I mean, all noise can be a CV output, can it? You feed white noise into like a linear FM input on your oscillator, and especially if you have an attenuator, you can just bring a little bit of that in and get some of that sort of unsteadiness in the sound that sort of boards account into sound, right? That's a cool use of white noise as a CV control. So it's a simple module, but it does have that brown noise output. $55, 4 HP. The Pure Noise from GMSN. Next is the Pure SNH, a classic modulation source that generates random voltages based on an incoming voltage, usually noise. So this is meant to be paired with the previously seen noise module. You have a clock input, and there is an internal clock generator that is governed by this rate knob. A signal input. Oftentimes you will use, yes, an audio rate noise input into the signal input, unattenuated, and you'll get a full range of voltages out. Doesn't say what the range output is on this module. So you have a very simple sample and hold with no internal noise source. So by itself, without feeding it an external input into the signal input, it's not going to do anything. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this module. But, there are many uses for sample and hold other than just the classic sort of white noise into it and make the Pink Floyd noise out the other ends. Explore sample and hold, I encourage you. This one is $64. It's 4 HP, the GMSN Pure Sample and Hold. Next up is the Pure VCO by GMSN. It's a classic analog sound source, has triangle, saw, and pulse outputs with a coarse and fine tune control of the frequency across the whole audio range right down to LFO frequency. The pulse width can be set from 0 to 100%, with 50% being square out. There's also a 1 volt per octave CVN FM input, so a linear FM input with the control of the level, PWM input, again with control of the level, and audio sync input. Notable about this module, I think, is the frequency range, 12 hertz to 56 kilohertz. That's extremely high. $123, 10 HP, so a fairly cheap VCO. The Pure VCO from GMSN. Next up is the Pure VCA. The Pure VCAs are real workhorse modules. Why do companies like to use the term workhorse so much, so frequently? I see that used in Eurorack. If it's a simple module, don't call it a workhorse. A poor horse. It's been worked to death already. Leave the horse out of it. It's the workhorse module used to control the volume or amplitude of an audio or CV signal. This is controlled either by the offset knob or automatically using a control voltage. So notably, it does use that 2181 is used in the VCA. It's a fancy chip, and that's going to actually probably affect the price a little bit here. $100 for HP VCA. So, in comparison to their other modules, which have quite a few features for the price. Honestly, a lot of these modules are very low cost, but they're very simple at the same time. This one's a little bit more, but it uses a fancy that 2181 chip in it. A volume knob, a CV level, attenuator input, signal in, CV in, and signal out. Very simple VCA. Again, $100, 4 HP. It's the Pure VCA by GMSN. GMSN! Next is the Pure LFO from GMSN. A sine, triangle, and square outputs from 0.1 hertz to 1.2 kilohertz. There's your rate control there. A range to switch from 0.1 hertz to 41 hertz and 39 hertz to 1.2 kilohertz in the two ranges. Sine, triangle, and square out. So no CV input at all on this module. But that's all right because it's a workhorse. Another workhorse module. LFO. It's a real workhorse module. $72, 4 HP. It's the Pure LFO workhorse module from GMSN. Next, we have the Pure VCF from GMSN. It is a pure VCF used to filter two incoming audio signals. This can be done manually using the cutoff knob or automatically using control voltages. There is a feedback knob controlling the resonance. This causes an amplification of the signal at the cutoff frequency, giving the classic squelchy acid sounds. This feedback can also make the filter self-oscillate, providing a very clean sine wave output. And it can be calibrated to 1 volt per octave. 2 inputs with their own attenuators, CV level, so presumably that's going to be an attenuator there. And 2 controls here on the bottom that I can't quite read. And I did visit their website, but the same pictures are there. So I don't actually know if the internet knows what these 2 knobs say. It can zoom in down there. I think that's resonance down there. I see a CE. Up there, fart? I don't know. It's fart. The fart knob. So this is, when you're taking product photos as a manufacturer, make sure that your product photos reveal all the labeling. It is a unique filter. It has 2 separate inputs and 2 separate outputs, one for each pole. So the 2-pole and the 4-pole output, I think, make it unique, even though it does have a fart knob. The Pure VCF by GMSN. This is the Pure ADSR from GMSN. It's used to create a CV envelope which can be patched to other modules. It has 3 different kinds of envelopes to choose from: an ADSR, an AR, and trap mode, which is trapezoidal. So this is actually kind of interesting because there's not a lot of trapezoid generators in a small format like this. Attack, decay, sustain, release, your typical controls, but you can switch the mode with this knob, it looks like. It has a manual trigger button, which is, I like to see that, especially on an ADSR, because an ADSR is sort of meant to be either held high with a gate or just triggered. One of those 2 things, and sometimes the source that you're plugging into it doesn't do one of those 2 things. Maybe it's only a gate or it's only a trigger, and so you can reach up there once in a while and add a little bit of flourish to your music by tapping on that little trigger button, giving it an actual little tap, add a little note in there that your audience didn't expect, kind of tease their little ears. $103, 8 HP. It's the Pure ADSR from GMSN. Last up, we have the Mac Daddy of the lineup, the Pure Sequencer from GMSN. It's an 8-step multiple mode sequencer. It's used for creating melodies, hooks, and riffs. The 8 sliders set the notes to be played, which can be played in turn, randomly, or pendulum. Each step also has a gate out, which can be used to trigger drums or notes on specific beats. All right, 8-stage sequencer. This particular configuration, with the gates or the trigger outputs at the top, is kind of the classic configuration we see with the Moog 960 and the original Buchla sequencers. They all had this sort of configuration. There's some unique controls on this one. You have a clock input, a direction switch, a clock output, and E, as well as a pause button, a reset input, a range switch, and a CV out, as well as a knob that controls the parameter, which is a small curve. It's a big module. It's 24 HP, but it only costs $193, so it is a very affordable sequencer. It can be put into run modes, and it can be put into pause mode with that pause button, so you can adjust each slider to the note of your liking, which is a nice feature, I think. It's the Pure Sequencer by GMSN. Let's back out and look at the rack again here, and look at the lineup here as a whole. And, they're nice modules. They're aluminum faceplates, very simple labeling on them. So that's the GMSN Pure lineup. Again, watch out for the power. Watch out for the knobs that you can't see. But other than that, they look like great modules. Next up is the Pico DSP by Erica Synths. Erica Pico DSP is a small brother of our recognized Black Hole DSP module. It features 8 custom effects with 2 adjustable parameters and CV control over the first parameter. The 8 effects are mono delay, pitch shift delay, stereo delay, granular delay, reverb, saturated reverb, Leslie speaker, and overdrive and bit crush. And I've heard this module, and it sounds really good, especially for 3 HP. And it is very simple, but then again, it's very small as well. Parameter 1 here is under CV control, so you do have some maybe more limited than other modules. For instance, the Aeverb Mark II that we looked at earlier, every parameter was under CV control, but this is half the HP. Parameter 2 does not have voltage control, and the dry wet does not have voltage control. You can switch between algorithms. There's a button here. It's difficult to see, but there is a button here, and that will change the color of this nice LED, and that will tell you which algorithm you're on. It has a stereo output, but only a mono input. I find that useful, actually, especially in modular world, where most of your sound sources, unless you have a stereo-minded system, most of your sound sources are going to be in mono. And this converts it to stereo for you, so thank you for that. Pico DSP by Synths, $134, not very much money. 3 HP. It only draws 30 milliamps on the plus and 20 on the minus, so that's very good. 35 millimeters in depth, not very deep. Very small module. A lot of features packed in there. I don't think I've seen a dedicated DSP reverb delay sort of module this small yet. I could be wrong, but that's the Pico DSP by Synths. Next, we have the Pico Logic. It's a Boolean logic module that allows to manage several gate signals in advanced ways. It has the following algorithms: OR, AND, XOR, NOR, NAND, set, reset, divide by 2, and divide by 4. You can tell the difference by this LED. That might be kind of tough at first for these because it doesn't, unlike the DSP module that we just looked at, the result is not going to be immediately available to your ears. You're going to have to wait until the right combination of triggers comes in. So a very simple module, but it does quite a bit, again, in a 3 HP footprint for $90. The Pico Logic by Synths. The Pico ALOGIC is another module from Synths that does logic. It's our CERN Hadron Collider for CVs. It takes 2 incoming CVs and outputs momentary sum and difference of both CVs, so ring modding at audio rates essentially, as well as following curves maximum and minimum values of both CVs. So you can do that with audio rate or CV and get interesting effects. Try to patch audio signals into both inputs and get distinct ring mod and wave shaping effects on the min and the max outputs. So another type of logic module. This one you can use at audio rates. You can with the OR XOR type modules as well. You can use those at audio rates and get different types of distortion essentially. $67, 3 HP, the ALOGIC module from Synths. The final Pico module by Synths is the SEQS. So this is another module in Eurorack named SEQS. Now, we have 2 that I know of. First one by Pro Modular, I believe, with the CEX clock generator. Now we have the SEQS Pico by Synths. A CV-controlled sequential switch. It is an advanced 4-channel sequential switch with sophisticated control over switching the channels. It combines clock and or CV signals to advance to the next step and define the number of steps. Use it for switching CVs or audio sources in order to achieve distinct modulations and soundscapes. Clock input, CV input, presumably to select the step, COM, which I guess is going to be your input or output, and 4 inputs or outputs. And you can take an input, for instance, to the COM and have it switch sequentially to one of these 4 outputs, or you can take 4 inputs to these 4 inputs and have them come out this one output as they're stepped through by your clock input there. So that is the Pico SEQS CV controlled sequential switch. $78, 3 HP. Everyone that does sequencing in modular, not just Eurorack, in the world, anywhere, needs a sequential switch in their systems. All right, look at this great big Bowser. It's Voltage Block by Malekko Heavy Industry. 8 independent 16-stage CV sequencers packed with performance features and presets makes the Voltage Block the ultimate CV control tool. Now, at first glance, this would appear to work the same way as the GMSN pure sequencer that we looked at earlier. You know, you've got a row of 8 sliders with 8 jacks at the top. You know, those are probably, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you get a gate out of these holes right here, right? No, that's not how this works at all. Each of these sliders is essentially your level, your CV level control for 8 different sequencer outputs. That's what these 1 through 8 label jacks are. They're sequencer channel outputs. As the sequencer steps through, channel 1 of the sequencer comes out this hole, channel 2 comes out this hole. And this fader here controls that CV level that's coming out of there. So while the sequence is running, you can move the fader up and down and record that movement as CV with. So while the sequencer is running, you can move this fader up and down, record the movement of that fader as CV across 16 steps, and have that value outputted at that channel, and do the same for all 8 channels. There's mute, there's a quantizer, so you can select scales with that button, as well as save. There's a clock and CV input, as well as a reset or hold input, and a switch to select various modes. It's a different way to sequence. Some people have compared it to like maybe an electron paradigm. So that's the voltage block from Malekko, part of the Ben Davis sequencing ecosystem. Next is the Synthrotek Power Pak. It is a power module, but it's not a normal like power input module that we normally see in 4 HP size. It's a power output module. So this features, we can see here, 2 USB ports for 5 volts, which we've seen before in a few different modules. They're handy to have for sure. The Arturia products, a lot of the sequencing products use USB to power them. The Korg products use USB. The SQ1 does anyway. You can use gooseneck lamps in there to get nice lights for, nice portable lighting for your rig. But this also features a really good idea. 12 volt and 9 volt outputs for powering guitar pedals or other tabletop devices. So you're offered both polarities essentially for on 2 different outputs here for both the 9 and 12 volts. So essentially, you plug this into your bus, and it uses power from your 12 volt line, and it's just going to use just as much as the device that you plug into it demands, plus a little bit probably. It's not maybe a solution for every situation, but if you play live at all, you understand that reducing the number of AC cords and other sort of power cords is really beneficial in every way. First off, you don't have to carry them. You don't have to pack them up at the end of the show. Using your Eurorack is kind of the centerpiece of like a tabletop setup, and powering things off of it is sometimes like a really legitimate way to cut down on setup time, and this can take a lot of power out of the rest of your Eurorack system. So beware of that. This can pull up to 700 milliamps, 750 milliamps on the 9 and 12 volt rails, and 1,000 milliamps on the 5 volt rails. So it'll put a dent in what your 12 volt supply can give to the rest of your modules. So just be aware of that. $85 for HP, the Power Pak from Synthrotek. This is the AI003 looping envelope generator from AI Synthesis. It is a looping envelope generator. It can be manually triggered via momentary push button, gated via the gate signal, trigger or re-triggered by a trigger input, or set into a loop mode via a toggle switch. There's an LED. In gate or trigger mode, this envelope can be used as a traditional ADSR envelope generator. In loop mode, the output sends a variable exponential wave shape between ramp, triangle, and sawtooth LFO with control over the attack and decay of the LFO shape. You can switch from ADSR mode, which is pretty standard. You have a manual push button for that, triggering that function. Switching it into loop mode turns it into essentially a function generator with the attack and decay knobs. Also features a re-trigger input, which is really nice for a looping function generator like that. What do you use with an ADSR to get the most out of a sustain knob? You use a gate. A gate is something that you usually manually hold high, as with a keyboard, but it doesn't have to be. That's necessary for the sustain stage in an ADSR. That's what sets the length of that stage. So without as many gates flying around in the Eurorack world, there's not quite as many ADSRs as one would expect. And a lot of people, when they get an ADSR, don't really see the full potential of it because maybe they don't have as many gate sources in their system. Anyway, it's nice to see another ADSR come out, and as well, you can switch it into that loop behavior if you don't happen to have a gate source floating around. So there's a lot of functionality there with that, and it's a very clean layout, and it's a nice color. It's a nice red Davies knobs. I like that. That's the AI003 looping generator. It's $95, 8 HP from AI Synthesis. This is the Befaco voltage-controlled ADSR. Our take on the classic ADSR. This compact unit features voltage control for each stage with manual faders to improve usability, feel, and aesthetics. There's a manual trigger button again. We have an input that's, in this case, switchable between trig and gate style input. An output is up here. We have a knob that can select, looks like, between Mount Everest and shark fin mode, aka logarithmic to exponential. ADSR on sliders. Some people really appreciate an ADSR with sliders. I definitely do. It's a nice feature. Lights for each stage of the ADSR. Gate outputs for each stage. So at the end of each stage, the gate would go high. CV input for each stage. So full CV control over the length of each stage. Quite a lot of features in this module. 8 HP, $179. This is the voltage control ADSR from Befaco. This is an interesting module. This is the Assist Percussive Utility module from Blue Lantern Modules. What this purports to be is a module that simplifies drum patching and simplifies, I guess, the process needed to make a drum sound in the modular world. I didn't, was simplification needed? But apparently it was. This module gives you all the tools needed to make a kick drum or percussive sounds using your own VCO modules that you have laying around. This is only 3 patch points required to connect this to your VCO module. You connect 2 patch cables to your VCO CV inputs and connect the VCO wave output into the Assist Jack audio in. There's a decay knob and a depth knob for the pitch up here. Boost and pop also. I'm not sure if that's a pitch function or not. Inverting and non-inverting switch. The amplifier section is down here, so you have a decay of the amplifier, so length of the kick drum, VCA CV amount, depth, and a large VCA knob here. This is the Assist Percussive Utility module from Blue Lantern Modules. It's $199 and 12 HP, and it's a drum module that you need other modules for, and it will turn them into drums for you easily. This is the Befaco MIDI thing. It's a 4-channel multi-mode MIDI to CV converter. Got 4 different modes. 1 MIDI channel in mono mode goes to pitch, velocity, bend, modulation, and gate. So all the normal, like, fully maxed out keyboard functions. If you have like a Roland A series controller or something, yeah, switch to mono mode. Duo, 2 MIDI channels to pitch, velocity, and gate with another set of the same. And poly, 4 MIDI channels, pitch, and gate times 4. Similar in functionality to the Yarns, but a lot smaller. Definitely fewer functions. There's a MIDI DIN input on the front. Boy, those are going away, aren't they? A learn button somewhere on here. Oh, yeah, right there, the big red one. And you can switch between modes with that button as well if you push it for 5 seconds. Here are your outputs here. Gate would be the one with the LED, I would assume. The one on the left is going to be CV. Yeah, that's what it says down here. Duh, read. Clock and start-stop outputs as well. So this module looks very useful. It's $224, 6 HP, the MIDI thing from Befaco. This is the STD by Animodule. We're so proud of our STD, we'd like to share it with you. It's 2 independent tap tempo clock channels. Prefer to use it as a gate? Yes. Yes, I want to drive one of the ADSRs we looked at earlier. No problem. Just patch it into the gate input. So it's maybe difficult to translate the functionality from this panel because it's just, maybe it's the render, maybe it's this particular panel, difficult to read. So I'm just going to go back to the description. So this is essentially, just like it says, 2 tap tempo clock channels, logic outputs here at the bottom, CV input for the division or multiplication for each channel, separate outputs for each, $179, 6 HP. It's the STD by Animodule. Next up is the ER110 from ARREL Audio, a high-fidelity stereo parametric equalizer plus Baxandall. It's essentially a stereo equalizer. It looks like it's meant to expand on their ER100 mixer. They've got a lot of nice audiophile stuff written about it here. Yeah, it's basic stereo input and output. No CV at all, it appears, but there is a bypass button. The peak indicator, high and low pass shelving filters, as well as a parametric EQ section where you can actually select the frequency and then select the gain of that frequency. It's a basic EQ, but I've researched this company a little bit. They look like they specialize in high-end sort of pro audio stuff, so it's cool to see them coming into Eurorack. I think we'll see more pro audio companies coming into Eurorack. It's the ER110 EQ from ARREL Audio. This is the crossfade by Noise Reap. Just a simple crossfader in 4 HP. This module takes 2 incoming signals, audio or CV, and mixes them at a 50-50 ratio. A positive signal at the CV input will make the up or top input louder and the down input quieter. A negative signal at the CV input will have the opposite effect, so it's a bipolar input. Very simple layout. CV input, just like it says, and 2 outputs. Very simple layout, pretty much exactly what goes into the description. I love the panel art. It's very nice. I like the little tiny mini bone sticking out of the hand there. $39, not very expensive, 4 HP. Another cool module from Noise Reap for not a lot of money. This is the Delta delay from Noise Reap, a lo-fi, high-fun delay built with experimental drone and grime techno in mind. Voltage control of delay, voltage control of feedback, full extremes blend control, 3 simultaneous dedicated outputs, no caps in the signal path, delay gates, envelopes, etc. So it'll work on CV as well. A noise cut switch changes the amount of digital trash and white noise in the signal. Just looking at it, it just looks like a fairly straightforward analog style delay. You have your CV inputs up here and your outputs down below here. So I'm assuming this is based on the PT2399 chip along with the rest of them because it looks like a fairly simple design just from the front panel, but I don't know that for sure. So what's interesting to me about this is that it advertises the ability to delay CV signals as well as your normal audio AC signals. So that's very cool. $83, very inexpensive, 8 HP. It's the Delta delay from Noise Reap. Another ARREL Audio, this time it's the ER130 mid-side module. We've seen a couple mid-side style processing modules in Eurorack now. This is another one. It is the answer to all stream creative needs for Eurorack synthesizers. Its features set it apart from other similar products on the market due to a very high fidelity approach used for the design of the electronic. Mid-side processing is based on the coding of a stereo signal into 2 components. The mid channel contains the information that appears in both the left and right channels, and the side channel contains all of the information that differs between the left and right channels. Once encoded into mid-side, these 2 signals can be creatively, in quotation marks, processed independently before being decoded back into the left and right channels. So essentially all this module is doing is taking a stereo signal, turning it into a mid-side signal, and then sending it out, making it available for further processing, and then returning that signal back into the stereo domain. So it doesn't do any spectral processing per se on its own, but it does separate that content out for you so you can do further processing with the rest of your modules. If you're interested in mid-side processing, this is a module to take a look at. Again, not inexpensive, $470, but not a lot of modules do this. 142 millimeters of depth, so watch out for that. It is going to be a deeper module. It's the ER130 from ARREL Audio. We round out the Roundup this month with a Gieskes module, which is, most of us know, in a genre of its own typically. This is a relay percussive module. There's not a lot of description here on the page, but let's pop it open. And what you can see this is, there's actually a pretty large relay in there that's fitted with either some sort of microphone or some sort of device that picks up the noise that the relay makes. So relays typically click when they're activated, and that's presented as an audio signal. So you can use the clicking sound of the relay as a percussive sound in your patch. Also, it passes electricity through the relay, just like a regular relay should. So on Gieskes' site, you can see video of the relay turning on and off under voltage control and turning like an RC helicopter on and off, and other devices that are powered electrically. So you can send external voltage through this relay and regulate it with the CV from your modular and take that electricity out and do something else with it. Run a motor, run a helicopter, whatever you want to do. Gieskes is well known, right, for being very creative with his module designs, and this is another excellent example of that. $147. It's 8 HP. It's the Relay Perc from Gieskes. So that is the Roundup for November. Mucho apologies for getting it out so late. This takes a really long time to kind of go through and research the modules and then find the time to actually sit down and record these. Also, it takes a lot of effort. So I'm going to work a lot harder on getting December's out much more quickly. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the Roundup for this November, and I'll see you at the next one.